Good morning, Minecrafters, and welcome to episode 2 of season 2. Stop worrying and make money. So last week we were talking about the happiness advantage and Sean Akers' work. And by the way, his book is so good. I've had students say it was life-changing for them, actually. He also has some good TED Talks out there. But anyways, we're talking about today's going to specifically relate to money, right? Let's just recap for a second here, because Sean says, remember, the happiness advantage is about, because positive brains have a biological advantage over brains that are neutral or negative. This principle teaches us how to retrain our brains to capitalize on positivity and improve our productivity and performance. And this general message of actually 2 weeks ago, is going to kind of transfer right over into what we're talking about today, which is our own relationship to money. And we start out with a lot of people don't understand this, and honestly, I'm still a work in progress with this myself. Money, our relationship with money, has lots and lots to do with our relationship with ourselves. I mean, think about it. Think about what money is, right? Money is an exchange of our own life minutes, and there is nothing more valuable than our life minutes, and we're exchanging this for a service or a material thing or whatever. So think about if we put it in like an 8-hour workday, right? So 8 hours of our valuable life minutes. Think of 8 hours of your life minutes at whatever age you are out there listening, okay? And when we're 85, might want those 8 hours of life minutes at 25, 35, 45, or 55 back. 8 hours of our life minutes. We put this money that we earned in the bank, which represents what we basically sacrifice for that day, right? And also how we manage money just in general. Not only how we spend it, but how we save it, and all the choices we make have lots to do with how we value ourselves. Okay, so that's the first part. And then also we think about the advantages of not worrying, and how this tied into what we talked about a couple weeks ago with the advantages of happiness. So this means that whatever we choose, to take that money out of the bank, let's say, metaphorically, or to spend on, a mortgage or rent or a birthday gift or out to dinner with someone who's really important to us, that is if you think about it this way, it's a real compliment. Let's say it's out to dinner for some nice event, and we're taking money out of the bank to spend on that person. What that is saying underneath it all is, you are worth the valuable life minutes I spent to make this. You are worth that. When we think of it like this, it can really change our whole idea of money, and definitely make it tougher to spend. We're going to think it through a little bit more. Okay, so here's where we're going to kind of differentiate between worrying, stress, and anxiety. And we've talked about those through the podcast. We're going to bring this into how this can actually throw a big wrench into our ability to make money, and how kind of, sort of unhinging that will then open the doors for us to make money. Whoops, I meant stops being functional. So I guess I could agree with that to a point. If somebody, was able to kind of think about something and problem solve for, a short amount of time, which is what the article is saying. I just think in reality, it doesn't work that way for most people. I think most people get really locked into worrying, which kind of goes the opposite direction. And the author of this article, Emma Patty, does actually say that. She has it on the bottom. It says, worry is only helpful if it leads to change, not if it turns into obsessive thought. So I guess we do agree. I'm just thinking that I think probably it's more the exception than the rule when people are able to control this. I think worry actually gets way out of hand for most people. She has some tips here, 3 things to help your worries. And first, Emma says, give yourself a worry budget. She says, an amount of time in which you allow yourself to worry about a problem. When that time is up, consciously redirect your thoughts. Okay, that's the first one. And she says, second, when you notice that you're worried about something, push yourself to come up with the next step or action. And that's good, because if you kind of get yourself going and worrying about, let's say, what you can't pay, bills, of course, is a very common one, or relationships or whatever, that to kind of work it into something practical. Okay, I've got this, problem, this situation going on, and let's, take some steps toward a solution. Good. 3, she says, write your worries down. She says, research has shown that just 8 to 10 minutes of writing can help to calm obsessive thoughts. Now, this is also very interesting, and I was just reading another article not that long ago that said something similar. But the thing is, you'll also find a lot out there that says the exact opposite of this. So I think it's very good to bring in different perspectives into a podcast and a discussion, which is what this is. And maybe, perhaps, those tips will work for you, and that's fantastic. For me, I'm not a fan of that tip of setting aside worry time. Again, maybe it can work for you. I'm definitely, and as far as the journaling thing, journaling is fantastic. We know that journaling works for all sorts of things. However, for me, I'm definitely more of a gratitude journal person because we know for sure, I mean, with brain scans and everything, that the more we, shift into this place of focusing on what we have versus what we don't have, we know for sure that, there'll be some neurological change in a more positive direction. And when we have this sort of attitude of gratitude, we actually attract more to us. So if it's money and we're focusing on, maybe we only have, $8 in our checking account, instead of focusing on, oh my God, what if something happens? Oh my God, now I have $8 in my checking account. Instead try to shift. Remember, that's an uphill shift because we're prone, physiologically speaking, to negative thinking. We have to work at positive thinking. If we can instead shift out of the half empty perspective, right? To, okay, if $8 in my account, that's better than no dollars, okay? And try to shift into thankfully, and then start, having an attitude of gratitude of what is going well in our lives overall. That works better for me, but it is good to offer, other people's perspectives for sure. So as far as worry goes, I'll tell you what I explain to my Minecraft students, which this is what I believe in my own life and why I'm not a huge worrier. And again, we talked about this, right? What we practice, we inevitably get good at. So we've talked about how to control our thinking, because we are what we think. We know this to be true. We are what we think. Remember, if somebody says, "Oh, we are what we eat," well, think about that. You're not eating much if, let's say, we had somebody sitting in our virtual audience right there, right? And we carved open their skull with kindness and anesthesia and put their brain in a big jar of formaldehyde on a shelf and said, how's that burger? They're not going to have a big answer for you, right? Or how are you feeling? You're not going to have an answer for you there either. So obviously, without the brain, there's nothing else going on. We are what we think. So when we learn to control our thoughts, which has everything to do with what we're talking about today, which leads into the money piece we're going to get to, we are in a much better place for this goodness to come in. So speaking of practice, what I explain to my students is, we've got stress, which again, my favorite definition of stress is wanting the present moment to be something other than it is. Wanting the present moment to be something other than it is. So remember, we've had examples of this throughout. You blow a tire on a highway, on the way home, it's dark, your cell phone's dead. All of a sudden, heart's amped up, racing, blood pressure's up, your mind is everywhere. What if thinking? What if? Is that really about the tire blowing, or is it about you're late for work, you're late for a date, you're late for home? Now you're thinking about the money it's going to cost. What are you going to do tomorrow to get into work? It's all this what if thinking. It's not really about the tire, okay, itself. So wishing the present moment was something other than it is. We're something other than it is. I love that, okay? And it's when we don't accept that it is what it is that we get stressed. And anxiety is obviously in the mind. And worry is really sort of kind of like, an expression or manifestation of anxiety, right? So what I explain to my students is what we practice, we get good at. We know that to be true, right? Whether it's the violin, soccer, robbing banks, and we can get really, really good at being nervous and stressed out if we practice it. And this is what worry is to me. Worry is actually practicing being anxious. Think about it. When we allow thoughts to roll through our heads, and we are allowing it, and I know people who are diagnosed with this and that, they have something extra to deal with, and nobody's saying it's easy. However, the news is happiness is still a choice. Controlling our thoughts is still a choice. It may be harder for some than others, for sure, but it does still come down to us choosing to allow certain thoughts in. So worrying, the what if, and leading into the catastrophizing thinking, which is if I practice, every worst case scenario, I'll be ready, like in the short stop position, like we've been talking about. When we allow these repetitive hamster in a wheel thoughts to continue, what we think about is how we're going to feel, right? So if we're worrying and practicing it and getting really good at it, we're going to walk around feeling anxious and fearful most of the time. And then sometimes I'll say to my students, think about it, you can become a world-class warrior if you want to. Just continue to practice anxious thinking and fear-based thinking. Practice it all day, every day. And you'll be like Michael Phelps going up there for his 8th gold medal. You can stand up on that top tier, the little podium thing, right? And receive the gold medal for worrying, because that is how it works. So now when we're talking about making money, it really isn't different than the rest of what we've been talking about, because think about it. We only have so much emotional energy in one day, right? And then I'll ask my students this, and they think it's a trick. So eventually they come up with 100%, which is accurate. We only have 100% of our emotional and cognitive energy to give to anything, whether it's work, school, or, a conversation in a relationship, a chess game, whatever it is, we've got exactly 100% to give. That's it. So picture it. So I usually do a picture on the board. I draw a circle and I do pie slices. Okay. So if we take, maybe 5% out because we wake up thinking about something last week that bothered us. Well, that's over, right? But five or maybe even 10% of our cognitive and emotional energy is going to something that's over. Okay. That leaves us with 95 or 90% of our emotional and cognitive energy to take on this day right now. So then another 5 or maybe 10% goes into the workday that's coming up. And, oh my gosh, I forgot I had that meeting. Oh, I'm double booked. Oh, I got to deal with that conflict I have with that employee, or I got to deal with this conflict I have with this coworker. And there goes another 10% of that energy. Okay, now we just lost 20%. We're not even out the door yet. Then enter maybe the worrying about the bills. Okay, and there goes another, maybe 10 or 20%. So we walk out the door to work, and we're operating. We got 60% of our cognitive and emotional energy to put into this day, and think about how that can get in the way of money making, because it has a direct impact on the creativity flow in. Think of it like, like the ocean. I'm coming up with this as I'm thinking of it in this minute, not planned. On the beach, when you think of the little kids down where they dig holes right close to where the water comes up, and when they dig a hole right by the water, it just fills up, right? Automatically fills up. Well, that's the same thing with creativity, for business opportunities, for writing novels, for filmmaking, for writing that children's book you've always wanted to write, for whatever can. And the fact is, we know for a fact, when we do what we love, the money will follow. When we do what we love, what we're meant to be doing, when we pursue our passion, this is when the money flows into that, just like that hole in the ocean, just fills right up. So when we practice worrying, practice giving up, our creativity in a silver platter, this is obviously going to impair our availability to receive all this creative thinking. So I'm going to take us back to Richard Carlson. Again, we've been talking about him with his Don't Sweat the Small Stuff book series, and he's fantastic. He also has another one out called Don't Worry, Make Money. And he's got a lot of good things to share with us. It's interesting because Richard Carlson, I got to meet this guy, starts out talking about that famous song, Don't Worry, Be Happy. And he talks about that being kind of like as if, this Bobby Efron were singing his thoughts. And I've always thought that was kind of, I've got several theme songs actually, but that would definitely be one. I love Don't Worry, Be Happy. And he talks about when we're happy, we not only enjoy our lives more than when we are not happy, but we are far more competent, productive, and creative. Without the internal distractions of anger, depression, frustration, and especially worry, our relationships flourish, stress is diminished, new doors are opened, and our lives run smoothly. Well said, Richard Carlson. And then he goes on for a little bit, kind of very courageously admitting that this is something he's struggled with, and he says he's always been a little unnecessarily cautious, and kind of acknowledges that part of him just plain worried too much. And then he says he began to look carefully at people that he respected and admired, people who had made it, quote unquote, made it in their given fields. He says he looked at writers, athletes, businessmen and women, entertainers, speakers, therapists, entrepreneurs, corporate executives, and other professionals. And he said, and what I learned amazed me. He said, while there were certainly all types of people, women, men, conservative, liberal, left brain, right brain, oh, that's actually not a thing anymore, but anyway, street smart, Harvard educated, and so on, who had made it really big, he said there was a thread of consistency that ran through virtually everyone. They didn't worry about money. He said, interestingly enough, the lack of worry preceded the success. It was not a byproduct of it. This is huge. Then Richard Carlson goes on to say this. He's talking about all these people who, quote unquote, made it, right? And he says an inner unshakable confidence permeated their entire existence. They were creative problem solvers, great negotiators, and clever creators. They had an ability to see the big picture. They knew the formulas for success. And the best part of it was that in almost all cases, it appeared that the non-worriers, the successful people I was studying, truly loved their lives and the way they spent their time. They had fun. I have to tell you, Richard Carlson is singing my tune right now. This is just so true. And that book back in, I don't know, the 80s maybe? Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow. I forget. There's so many of them. And there was another one, maybe I'm thinking of this one too. What color is your parachute? I mean, you got to find out what makes your heart sing. Follow this. And, it turns into big money. And there's also something called flow that we'll get into a little bit later. But when it pertains here, when we talk about this and following your passion with my students, I show them some quick short little videos. And one of them is young Michael Jackson. He's like 7 or 8, maybe 9 at the very most. And he's flying around the stage in the Jackson 5 just singing, ba 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 ba. And he's just flying around. He's not thinking about a paycheck. He's too young to think about a paycheck. He's just so in the zone doing what he loves. And of course, the money follows. Michael Phelps again, just, following his passion. And then there's another, I'm going to forget her name now, but there's another 3-minute thing that I show my students. And this little girl is a surfer in Australia, and I think she's 7. And she's just, doing all this, this crazy competition out there, following and doing what she loves. And when we open ourselves up to this with as close to 100%, as of our cognitive and emotional energy, then that ocean thing we talked about, the creativity just flows right in. And when we allow, because the word is allow, the worrying to happen and then actually practice it or rehearse it, it's kind of like when that little kid's making that big, sand hole down by the ocean, and instead it caves in with sand, just gets right in the way and disrupts the flow. And I got to share this with you too. I was just reading this earlier, and I like how Richard Carlson shared about very honestly about his own life. He said, because he's done a lot of work on happiness and self-esteem stuff. This is what he does. This is what his passion is. And he said, I began to apply some of the teachings I've been working with in the field of happiness and self-esteem to my own business life. My life changed almost instantly. Whereas before I had felt quite frightened to speak publicly, now I began to love it. The less I worried about the outcome, the better I became at speaking. The less, And then he says, this translated into more speaking engagements, more book sales, and far more clients for my business. It was as if all of a sudden my time was in greater demand. Oh my gosh, this is so about how when we get, well, first of all, get rid of the worrying piece, like say no, stop the thoughts, right? Remember that not today, maybe tomorrow, to start becoming the boss of our brain. This is the first piece. And then, to embrace the magnetism we've been talking about, first we need to kind of, create the space by the thought control piece. And then remember to allow the goodness into that feeling that many of us can be uncomfortable with. If we, were mistreated in the past or whatever, we have to really work on that also. Because the gratitude and the happiness thing attracts more goodness, which includes money, abundance, prosperity into our lives. I'm thinking of, actually, this is a squirrel moment at this minute, because I'm thinking of another video clip that I've showed my students in the past. It's for motivation. I think of very young Jim Carrey. He was really, really young. It was before he even did Dumb and Dumber, and he was on Oprah, again, one of my closest friends. She just isn't aware. And he was talking. I mean, he was so young. I can't even guess his age. He was talking about when he didn't have anything. He drove up in a beater car up to the top of I've been there, so I'm trying to think of where it is in Hollywood. You kind of sit and overlook, the city, and it's very pretty. And he drove up there, and he didn't have anything. He was just getting started. And he said, "You know what? I'm going to write myself a check." I want to say it was for $10 million. Don't quote me, but it was definitely millions. He wrote himself a check, dated it, I think, for like 3 years later or something, and kept it in his wallet. And he just kept envisioning, stopping the worrying and just envisioning, this happening. And then he shares with the audience, don't you know that it wasn't, long after that, I forget, it was 1 year, 3 years, it was pretty close in proximity. And when he got the offer for Dumb and Dumber, actually, and the rest is, as they say, history. And this, gels and rolls right into what Richard Carlson continues with. He said about himself. See, he said, "I found that the same relationship between less fear and more success existed in my personal investments. As I worried less, I began to expand my knowledge about different kinds of investments and options. Never did I or will I jump into investment blindly." He's not saying that, of course, as some might assume a person would do if he didn't worry. Instead, he said, "I simply opened my mind to new possibilities." I love that. He said, "Instead of approaching my financial life with fear, I was beginning to approach it with wisdom. I took more appropriate risks and asked better questions. My profits grew. I was also learning how to cut my losses, again, without too much worry." And this also kind of touches on the, learning to work smart, not hard idea. I'm sure most of you have heard that kind of cliche. And disclaimer here, because many of you out there might be working 2 or 3 jobs and might be saying, "What does she know? She doesn't." Well, actually, I do know, because at 55, I've been around the block a few times and had to recover at different times financially along the way, and bartending while also teaching and doing other things. So I do know, and hopefully that is temporary. Okay, because when we do, follow our passion, follow what makes our heart sing, follow where our gifts lie, it is true that it does kind of just come together and can wiggle right into this working smart, not hard. And you get up every day. I can't wait. And I hesitate to call it work even. I can't wait to get to campus and teach and work with young adults, because my cup overfloweth, as I say. It doesn't even feel like work to me. And the other deal is, and I'm a work in progress as well. Always, we're all human beings. I'm not a worrier. I actively kind of, practice the strategies I share with all of you every day. If I need to, deep breathing, big, deep, deliberate breath. If I'm having a racy day or a worry tries to wiggle across my mind, big, deep breath. And it's an immediate reset of the mind, bringing my mind out of, this afternoon, tonight, or next Tuesday, right back into the now, freeing up my emotional energy, my cognitive energy, my creative energy, just like a wonderfully open baseball mitt to catch it all. And also, what becoming less of a warrior does for us is it also opens us up to, taking more risks. I mean, in a healthy way. You're not like, a teenager smoking a joint behind a garage. Not judging, because that's, happens. But we're talking about actual, trying things we haven't done before. And Richard taps on that too. And he said, He said, I tried things I never even dreamed of attempting, and not everything turned to gold, but some of it did. And that which didn't always turned out to be a great learning experience. And Sean Akers says something similar. It's kind of amazing, that these greats, we'll just call them greats, in the, happiness field, life crafting field. Now we're talking about mind crafting field. Sean Akers, says something similar, because when he talks about failure, he talks about it as a redirection. And it's not this, shaming, dive into a dark hole situation. It's life pointing us in a different direction. And he also talks about falling up. When we try something brand new, doesn't work out, okay. But we, instead of, again, falling into that dark hole, we run with it. That didn't work for me, but wow, I met these people from this experience, and that ends up sending us in a new direction. This is just the best attitude. And there's just so much more to what we're talking about. But for today, the last thing we're going to kind of bring into this is the mindful giving piece, because we know that the more we give, the more we receive. And it's not about, this is not really the intention we want, right? We don't really give to get back. We just know that this is true. I'm no expert on the Bible at all, the Christian Bible, but it does say that, right? We reap what we sow. We get back, tenfold or hundredfold or whatever. We know that that's true. And culturally, across the globe, different countries, different religions are saying the same thing. And when we are worrying less, right? We're talking about this open baseball mitt to just catch and receive everything the universe has to offer. We're in a far better place to want to give. Like this genuine generosity just kind of flows out of us. And another great one, John Kabat-Zinn, we've talked about him. He talks about the connection between mindfulness and generosity. There's just such a connection. It's all just gels together. And as tough as it may be for some people, when we trust that everything will be okay, it will. Once again, cultures and religions across the globe are saying this. The grass doesn't worry about growing. And Rich brings up Deepak Chopra, another one I love, another spiritual great. He has the 7 spiritual laws of success. Deepak talks about the law of giving, and basically he describes giving and receiving as 2 sides of the same coin. The more you give, the more you get back, and he's right. But you don't give because you want something. You give because giving is its own reward. I love that. It's fun. As you learn to worry less, you'll also learn to trust your heart as much or more than your head. While you will be doing better in different aspects of your life, you'll also be doing more for other people. You'll be far less preoccupied with success, yet ironically, you'll become more successful. That is so true. Oh my gosh. Just much more. You'll trust that everything will be okay, and it will. And it will. It's what's kind of, sort of just awesome, I guess, is sitting here, having this podcast, and just sitting here right now, things are just flowing through my head. They're just all coming together. We talked about Wayne Dyer's, when he talks about the Tao and all that, and just kind of letting go and letting your life unfold. It's kind of crazy. And Carl Jung saying that which we resist will persist. They're all saying the same thing. This illusion of control that we are operating, under, right? We don't have the control. So it's kind of like, let it all go, let your life unfold, doing what you love. Success will follow. Happiness has to come first for success to happen. It has to come first. It's also, life is just amazing. It can just be so incredibly wonderful once worry is diminished, because it just opens up. It just opens up like a flower in the spring, just lets it all in. Okay, so here we go with these other books I've been talking about. I can see it now. So Do What You Love and Then Money Will Follow. The author is Marcia Sinitar. Then we have Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Wayne Dyer, we talked about him in this podcast. He wrote Real Magic. And Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen's The Aladdin Factor. They're all saying the same thing, that less worrying is better. And basically, until we dramatically reduce worry and fear, it's very, very difficult to implement any kind of plan or strategies for success. Rich kind of winds us up here with, when we get rid of worry, becoming the boss of our brain and putting the brakes on the worry. Remember, the bar is not perfection. The P word is a bad, bad, bad one. Okay. The bar is do our very best. then, bring it back, become aware, and start over if we have to. Do our best. When we become better at not worrying, okay, we can, develop the confidence, because it opens it up. It's like that hole in the ocean thing. We can develop the confidence to pursue a new career or dream, the emotional freedom to ask others for help, the ability to handle criticism or rejection with ease, just with ease, letting it roll right through us, right? The confidence to take a risk, speak to a group, ask for a raise, do more for your favorite charity, invest in a business, or creatively market a service or product. When we get rid of what, that, remember the pie slice thing, right? With the circle, when we kind of grab back that 20, 30, 40, 50% or more, of energy going into worrying, and take that back, where we're up closer to 100%, the world becomes our oyster. Okay, the world becomes our oyster. So for those of you listeners out there who are new, there are lots and lots of strategies already out there. So you want to go back to some of the earlier episodes, especially It's Not Me, It's OCT. That's a 2-part one. That's loaded with really practical strategies to stop the unwanted kind of obsessive thinking and the intrusive thoughts, and the worrying. Is all kinds of strategies in that particular episode, and also part 2 of that episode. So you want to go back to that and revisit. And for those of you who've been listening all the way along, just a reminder that when these worrisome thoughts start, remember to take control of your mind. You're the boss. You're the captain of the ship, right? Becoming the boss of our brain. And what you do is you say, remind yourself, not today, maybe tomorrow. If it's whatever worry thought, what if, not today, maybe tomorrow. And keep up with that, because it involves commitment and practicing, right? And absolutely positively, the worrying will be dramatically reduced. So, main theme here, right, is stop worrying. Because you got to stop worrying to create the space for the abundance that is out there, just out there to roll right in, including the cash. Stop worrying and let the cash flow in. And on that thought, this is Kimberly Quinn signing off from Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.